So we are now on the third session of the cover up on this chest. The first session would be the outline along with a little bit of freehand drawing. Second session was the initial shading, which covers all the straight black and heavy shadowing areas, the deepest part of the dimension and the furthest part away from the foreground. And what I'm going to be doing now in this session is the intermediate and light black and gray shading, which is going to be the intermediate is pretty much the regular the tones and the shading, which would be like if you were to take a regular colored photo and change that into black and gray, the straightforward like your skin tones and stuff would be the intermediate color. The straight black and gray, which is the stuff I have there, would be, you know, your heavy shadow areas and darker colors. And the last pass I'm going to do is going to be the really light washed out black and gray, which is going to be would be the equivalent of shading from your skin tone into the highlighted spots where, like, you know, you have little like sun glare on it, or little highlights or little shines and stuff here and there. But initially I'm going to go with the medium color, because basically the way it works when you're doing either black and gray color, no matter what, you want to work from dark to light. So obviously I already did the darkest spots that need to be done. I'm going to work into the medium, then to the light. Now, being this is black and gray, I don't necessarily have to worry about contaminating the colors. So what I'm going to do is, after I do the lightest pass of black and gray on here and smooth out all the shading and bring it relatively close to the end, and that's all completely done, I'm gonna do a little bit of drawing on here, add some little details like little cracks and details and veins and whatnot in the wings, and I'm gonna go ahead and just go right over the top of all the shading with a fine liner and add all those little details in there afterwards. Obviously I'm gonna go into more detail about that later, but for right now I'm gonna go ahead and start with the medium black and gray shading. And again, I'm just starting with the easiest spot that's most comfortable for me right now. And from this particular angle, it's going to be right here on this secondary wing. I'm going to go and start right there and bring it into the center of the wing. Now my dilution rate right now with the straight black was straight black. There was no water in it whatsoever. I wasn't diluting it at all. And this, I'm using approximately 30% black and 70% water. Now, as I said before, with the black and gray, when you're doing the lighter passes of it, it's going to back up a little bit when it heals. And by backing up, obviously I mean lightening up. Now, it's pretty straightforward. The more water you add to your mixture and the lighter your black and gray dilution becomes, the more it's going to back up. So once I get into my areas where I'm using over 50% water, all the way up to where I'm using just a little bit of ink and the majority of the cap is water, it's going to start to lighten up substantially. And basically, you know, areas like this, even though once I'm done with it, the initial pass, it's going to look relatively dark, that's not necessarily what it's going to look like when it heals. It is going to lighten up quite a bit. And again, and the more water you use, the more drastic your change is going to be when it heals. So you have to keep that in mind. Basically, you have to keep track of the amount of water you're using in any given area, and you have to adjust the saturation. You have to adjust how dark you're filling in each area accordingly, according to how much water you're using. And basically you want to break it up to where you have a nice, smooth, even transition from solid black to skin tone. And you want to basically keep things even, you know what I mean? So if you were to break it up into little sections, say if there was 3 sections, you want solid black, medium, and skin tone. Obviously, there's a perfectly smooth transition when I'm going to be done from solid black to the negative skin. So there's not going to be distinct stopping points between the different dilutions I'm using, but I want to balance that out. So say I have, you know, a 1/2 inch of solid black on this side, I want to have about a 1/2 inch of negative skin on that side. You know, again, you want to just balance out accordingly, and you kind of want to keep that same formula balanced throughout the whole tattoo in any given area. You know, if you have the gradation pulled out over a very large area in the wings, and it's same, you know, it's nice smooth transition. Even though, say, if you break it onto a smaller area, even like the legs, you know, where you're working with an area that's only 1/2 inch long as opposed to, you know, 5 inches long, you still want that same balance throughout there, the same amount of dark as you do light. And basically what that'll do, if you stick to that formula, you won't have to constantly reference yourself and go back and forth and make sure you're measuring everything properly and keep it balanced out right, because it's basically instinctive. You know, when you see an area that you're working on, you already know exactly how far you need to bring out each pass of black and gray. And basically it just breaks down to just a much more efficient, quicker, easier way to go about breaking down the tattoo, and it becomes a little less overwhelming at times. And although that rule, that formula can be used, you know, verbatim, exactly without fail throughout the whole tattoo, and it'll come out fine, there are certain incidences, you know, where you might want to kind of play with that, tweak it and alter a little bit, and, you know, to add a slightly more dramatic effect as far as background and foreground, and you want some things to be a little darker than that formula would dictate. You know, you can tweak that obviously a little bit to your, you know, your own specific desires, however you see fit. But again, it's just a pretty easy, straightforward way to initially go about it until you get a good feel of, you know, how it goes in and how it heals and what exactly you're comfortable with using. And again, each person's skin, each piece is gonna, you know, dictate a different type of artwork that's necessary, and a different type of shading that you're gonna need to optimize the artwork, and, you know, when it's done,